Hey, this is Paul Moore from Wellings Capital. If you want to learn how to use your small axe to build an empire, you should be listening to the Small Axe podcast with my good friend Nico.
Hey guys, it's your boy Nico here from the Small Axe Podcast. I want to show you how to use your small axe to build a lasting empire. You see, not everybody begins their investing career with millions of dollars, a huge network of investors, or the knowledge necessary to become successful in this space, and that's okay. What I focus on here on this podcast is helping you hone your skills, sharpen your tools to become the best investor that you can be. Now, I want you to sit back, relax, and enjoy this show. If you have any questions or you want to reach out to me or the guest, feel free to do so. Love you guys.
All right, Small Axe community, it is Nico, and today I'm hanging out again for the second time on this show with Paul Moore. Now, last time we spoke was around, we were just discussing, it could have been a year and a half, maybe even 2 years ago, and things have changed since then. We spoke a lot about him and the self-storage business. He really got me excited for self-storage. I looked into it further. I have not yet made my foray into self-storage, but I'm still very intrigued by it. But since then, he's been working on a lot of things, and I want to get him on today to kind of catch us up to what he's working on, give us some insight into what is going on in today's market and why he's investing in what he is investing in today. So without further ado, Paul, welcome back.
Nico, it's great to be here again. Thank you.
Yeah, I am really appreciative of you and your time and your expertise. So thank you for joining me. And maybe you can kind of take a few minutes to give the listeners a little bit more of what you've been working on the past year and a half or so.
Yeah, so we've gotten to the size where we needed to change from what's called a 1933 Act syndication or fund to a 1940 Act fund. And probably people like, what does that mean? So it basically means we are not the operator of any of our assets. We're doing the property management. We're not doing the asset management. We're choosing wonderful operators to invest. And so we have stepped back a level. And so we are a fund that, does our best to provide diversification across different asset types, different geographies, different operators, strategies, and of course, projects. And so our fund, we invest in about 7 different asset types and 2 different positions in the capital stack. And our investors are hopefully getting that diversification and hopefully the benefit of the due diligence we do, which is quite extensive on these different operators and to a degree on the deals. And I say the degree because we do a ton of due diligence to decide if we want to work with an operator. And once we get a fantastic operator, that's putting their own money in the deal heavily, we don't have to do quite as much due diligence on each individual deal.
Excellent. And before we leave this topic, I need to ask you these questions because I am curious, and my listeners are also going to be curious. So you're kind of talking about vetting operators, and me and my listeners are typically either operators or aspiring operators. So how can they position themselves to be seen as a potential partner for you? I know you mentioned one thing.
Yeah, that's a great question, Nico. So we are looking for operators who have a team, usually geographically centered, not always, but usually a team that works together, that's worked together hopefully for years or decades of experience in commercial real estate, usually years or decades in this asset type. The exception to that is they can hire that talent. So for example, we're working with a commercial real estate operator who has an incredible track record since I think 89 or 92, and never lost any clients' money, but it's been in self-storage. But they pivoted to RV parks in the last decade, so they hired that talent. In other words, they got a very experienced RV park, national type level manager and she is their vice president. So that, that worked for that. But we're also looking for skin in the game. We're looking for the type of, conservative, generally fixed rate debt, or sometimes all cash deals. We're looking for conservative projections. Of course, we're doing extensive background checks, criminal checks, reference checks, all that kind of stuff to be sure that, this is somebody we want to invest with.
Do you need to have a certain time frame of knowing somebody like for a certain period of time, or does that not necessarily always come into play?
We are doing something else. I don't know if we'll have time to get into this, but we're doing something called pref equity or preferred equity. And in some of those cases, we've only known the sponsor for maybe 6 weeks. We've gotten to know them, let's say June 15th, and now it's August 1st, and we're ready to invest with them. There's a lot of reasons that's a little less time, but generally we get to know sponsors for months before we invest with them.
Awesome, Paul. And you also mentioned that something about the capital stack, and right now you're talking about pref equity. Is there any other positions you take in the capital stack?
We're generally LP equity, and so we're investing right alongside other investors. We typically are often bringing millions to the table. We've invested as low as $500,000, sometimes 10 million. We invested over 48 million with one operator. That was over several years. But we're generally LP equity, but we're getting into preferred equity now, because preferred equity, which sits behind the debt but before the LP equity, it has a higher position in the capital stack, more safety. It's got a lower LTV. It's connecting right behind the debt. It gets paid generally. Theoretically gets paid before the LPs. It has cash flow attached to it, though there's no guarantees, of course. Just like debt, it might start out at 9 or 10% as an example, cash flow right out of the gate. And then sometimes they'll, take us out early, and we might even make extra money from that, because if they take us out in a year and a half and they buy our position out, the sponsor gets to, they can buy that position, they can buy that equity and put it back in the LP group, or the GP in the LP group. And if they buy us out early, sometimes we get a little bonus for that. But there's all kinds of other details about pref equity. It's great for sponsors in certain situations, and it's certainly been great for us.
Awesome, man. I love to hear it. Now, talking about I guess let's backtrack a little bit. So when you're vetting, you mentioned vetting teams and sponsors, yes. But you also kind of said that to a degree is when you vet the deal. Now, so I have an underwriting model that I look at deals with, and I'm sure you do too. But is there a certain model that you use? I know that you do background checks on sponsors. I know that you kind of look at, their track record, and you kind of also look at how long they've been in existence for and how they've been performing. Is there a specific system that you use to vet them, or how does that work?
Yeah, we have a really, what I believe is a pretty incredible underwriter. And though there's no guarantees, anything we do will work. I should say that for compliance sake. But he is using their models, and he's adapting his thinking to their models. Sometimes he's taking their numbers and putting it into his own model that he created. But no, it's not standard all the time. And again, I don't want to sound like we're not doing the due diligence as much on the deals, but I mean, for example, we've got this sponsor we've invested, over 48, 49 million with. I mean, their track record is, it's been pretty surprising. They've had deals that have closed, that have a 40, 50, 80, even over 100% IRR. A lot. And their worst deal was just a tiny deal that lost a little money, and we were in complete agreement with why they got out of it. It was in the middle of the riots in 2020, and it just was a very difficult place to be in that certain city. And so But at any rate, we don't have to look at every one of their deals as closely, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does, absolutely. And you mentioned something that really raised my ears, and I'm going to ask you this question now. So how are you raising so much money? Is it just you? Do you have a team of people? Do you have like an intake? How does it work?
We do podcasts like this, and I write blogs on Bigger Pockets. I've written 3 books, 2 are on commercial real estate. I'm on Twitter, at Paul Moore Invest, if you want to join me there on Twitter. And I'm basically getting people who are contacting us. We don't do any significant outreach. We're not doing any real advertising, other than we pay sometimes to have our blogs on certain platforms. But yeah, they're generally coming to us. We have, over 700, I believe it's over 700 individual investors now, and they're all accredited investors.
That's incredible. I would love to take a look at that process at some point, even if it's not, it could be offline, because I'll reach out to you to kind of better my process of just gathering investors. I think it's really important.
No, thanks.
All right. So what kind of asset types are you looking at?
So we are generally looking at recession-resistant asset types. We're looking at self-storage, mobile home parks, RV parks, multifamily. I'll say specialized multifamily. We can circle back to that if you want. Light industrial, which is basically industrial parks, and open air shopping centers, which people might not think is exactly recession resistant, but it has been surprisingly resilient when done right by the right operator in the right location. We've been really pleased with that asset type.
Really interesting. Okay, let's unpack a few of those, or some of the more recent deals that you've looked at.
Yeah, so we are about to invest in a multifamily deal in Texas. Now, anybody who's from Texas knows their property taxes are really high. And there's a great need for affordable housing in a lot of the cities there. So we're partnering with an operator who has done 87 individual deals, investing in affordable housing there. And those 87 deals specifically are tax abatement deals. So they go in, they make a partnership with, let's say, like the one we're doing soon, the El Paso, or a neighboring suburb of El Paso, housing commission, where they put half of their units on an affordable basis, which means their rents will be a percentage of market rent. And in exchange for that, they don't have any property taxes to pay for 99 years. Sometimes it's 80% discount, sometimes it's 100%. In other words, no property taxes. And so a deal, an example deal there, and again, there's no guarantee it'll work like planned and that the appraisals are right, but a sample deal, they are closing on at $80 million or so. And the lender's appraisal at closing, because of this tax abatement structure, is $113 million. So they're gaining $33 million in equity. And the total equity in the deal day one is only 26 million or so. Wow. So that's over 100% on paper return on equity. And again, doesn't mean it'll always pan out that way. But another thing we like about that is it's starting out of the gate with a very, we think a very strong debt service coverage ratio at 1.5 right out of the gate. It's got 10-year fixed. Sometimes they have interest-only loans. It really is a very nice margin of safety for the investors.
That's awesome. I really like that idea and that model. So they strategically went after this because of the fact that taxes just got insane and are insane in Texas. I wonder if there's something that I could implement in Florida. It just gets me thinking these types of conversations. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about some other deals that you're doing. I know that you were recently on the I think it was the Real Estate Guys podcast. Yeah. And you're talking about some RV parks.
Yes. Nico, we really are. We wanted to invest in RV parks for years, but we couldn't find an experienced operator. There's 2 or 3 really big institutional operators that are doing a great job. And then there's a whole bunch of mom and pops, and there's not a whole lot in between, but we did find one that we really liked. As I mentioned earlier, they hired the VP to run those, or to help run those, but they've got a great team. RV ownership, you probably noticed, has been up a lot. It was up 62% or so from 2001 to 2022. 11.2 million US households own an RV, but check this out. A survey said that 9.6 million more plan to buy one, hopefully within 5 years. 26% of RV campers were new during 2020 alone. And then that continued to expand during the rest of COVID. I mean, people wanted a safe place to go. They wanted to vacation. And, something happened that was revolutionary around that same time, not just COVID, but we had something that's never happened in world history before. And that is a huge percentage of people found out they could work remotely. And they did. And a lot of them, like my friend who's a CEO of a startup, rented his house in Roanoke, Virginia, and hit the road. He actually, built in a desk that was on pulleys. He could pull it up or down to work, and sort of a standing desk. And he hit the road. And a lot of other people did too. So these destination campgrounds, people could go. One of my investors has been on the road, I think it's for 5 years straight, and they're hitting every national park and lots of other stuff around the country, but he's able to work a full-time job from there. And so this is pretty powerful. But something else that's really powerful, and that is the sharing model. Airbnb, Uber, they've obviously perfected the sharing model. Well, it's true for RVs as well. So an RV that used to sit idle 49 and a half weeks a year, it's only been used a couple of weeks a year, now can become a rolling rental unit, and it can be put out on the road. There's RV share, there's outdoorsy, they have insurance programs and, roadside assistance and all the stuff that makes someone like me who doesn't want to own an RV would love, to rent one for just a weekend, a week, or even a month. And it's increased. All this has dramatically increased the pressure on a limited number of RV sites that are out there. And we're so happy to be investing in this asset type.
Really, really cool, Paul. And I'm going to share with you something. Why it was so interesting to me is that I've been building my own teardrop trailer for camping
Oh my goodness,
for
yes.
7 months, and I just finished it. Today's July 31st. I just finished it on the 27th. My daughter and I got it registered and inspected, and then we went camping with it for 2 nights in an RV park. The same day it got inspected, and it was incredible, and I'm so excited about it. All my friends
That's
want one now.
fantastic.
I
Yeah,
know
is it
it's
like the silver sheet metal type?
correct. Yep.
That's great. Well, my friend made one of those, and he drove from Virginia to California, and he got all kinds of people along the way stopping him to ask if he would build one for them.
Oh, so cool. Okay, great. Now, are there certain geographical locations for these RV parks that work better?
Well, we have seen it work all over the country, especially near national parks, or destinations. But, we're investing in destination parks, which means, it's sort of an alternative to maybe Disney, for example. It's a place you can go, and I don't even have time on the show to tell you all the potential amenities at these parks, but a quick rundown would include, they include, of course, Wi-Fi and good cell service, but they include like a $2 or $3 million water park at some of them. They include a swimming lake with whibbits. Whibbits are those huge floating obstacle courses. They cost a couple $100,000 to install at a park, and they can rent those for $17 an hour per kid. So that could be $1,000 an hour, value add in the summer. They have food service. They have wedding venues at some of them. They have drive-in theaters, putt-putt golf, golf cart rentals. Sometimes the golf carts rent for more than the camping spots, amazingly. They have, face painting, t-shirt painting, gold mining, hay rides. They have units, where you can bring your dog, a fenced in area. They have glamping units. I mean, there's just on and on. I mean, some of these parks, if you can believe this, some of the parks out there, these destination parks, they might cost $2 to $3 million to acquire. And once they're fully built out and expanded, the total budget might be closer to $20 million. Now, that takes a lot of effort. And it's also creating, hopefully, some great barriers to entry around the park for competition.
Wow. Okay. Thank you for enlightening me on all that. I mean, there's a lot of great amenities that you mentioned, but also the barrier to entry it's almost like a development project.
Right.
Very, very interesting. Okay, so let's ask a little bit more of a broad question about the market today and where you see, how are you feeling? I mean, interest rates are higher than they were, obviously. Insurance is higher, expenses overall are higher. I don't know, historically, I haven't been around long enough to know if this is like the worst case scenario. I don't think so, but how are you feeling overall about the market and just acquiring properties at this time?
Right now, I mean, we are certainly concerned with, especially, what some folks have done to overextend themselves in multifamily. The news, came out last week, and it's been coming out for about 8 months, but that some of these big multifamily shops had, have 95% or more of their loans that are floating rate debt. Not only have their, debt service costs in some cases doubled, but their rents have not gone up as projected. Some of them have even dropped a little on average. Their occupancy has not gone up as expected. Their costs for running the place have skyrocketed through inflation. And what may be even worse that nobody's or very few people are talking about is their reserve requirements from their lenders are astronomical. Some of these, like I have a friend who was putting $1,000 a month into reserve for an interest rate cap that was going to be renewed in a year or two. He was putting in $1,000 a month, and the lender tapped him on the shoulder and said, you need to raise that to $89,000 a month. How does that survive? But he is surviving, but it's going to be rough for a lot of these guys. And so we're really very, very careful on what we're investing in. And this is where pref equity can really be a benefit in some cases.
Wow. Okay. That is huge. And why is pref equity a benefit in these types of cases?
So, I mean, there are, we're not doing this, but there's what's called rescue pref equity. So possibly rescuing a deal like that, a deal that really has tremendous team and tremendous, upside. It's just they can't go on the way they are, but they're going to get through it if they do things right. We don't do that. That's one type. But another example right now is, let's face it, lenders are lending at lower LTCs than they have before. And investors, LP investors, are more skittish than they were before. So that's creating a gap in some cases. So instead of, buying a $10 million property and getting a $7.5 million loan and $2.5 million in LP equity, sometimes they'll only get a 60% LTC or $6 million in loan, $6 million debt, and they'll only be able to raise $2 million in equity. Well, there's a gap then. 6 plus 2 is 8. They need 10. So they have a $2 million shortfall. Someone like us can come in the gap and put in pref equity between the two. They call it gap financing as well. There's another type that's not what we do, which is mezzanine debt. But that can really benefit a deal. And it allows them, once they get on their feet and going, 2 or 3 years down the road, they can take us out and they're buying back all that equity for the GP and the LPs.
Yes. Excellent, Paul. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And it comes down to if people are or operators are beginning to struggle and they cannot make these payments and these, like you're saying, I mean, either reserves are going way up or the interest rate caps or their interest rate went way up and they didn't buy a cap. I mean, so now the money's coming either from a capital call or from the GP's pocket, which might not be available, or they're forced to sell. I mean, there's so many situations here that are kind of scary. So people like you who are careful, cautious, and do your due diligence prior to investing is what is necessary in today's world.
Yep. Thank you.
Paul, we're going to transition to our final question and then get the listeners some form of contacting you. Now, I did not prep you for this. I always prep my listeners for this final question, but you've done it before, and I don't remember your answer. I think it was pretty cool though, but let's try it again. So let's imagine it was 100 years from now, and now you have great grandchildren. They're so happy, and they wanted to write a book about Paul, great grandpa Paul. What would you want them to title this book?
Paul Moore, Man of Integrity.
Perfect. Simple. I love it. That's all you need. If you strip the world down, you take money out of the picture, you take exchange out of the picture, all you have left is your integrity. And I think that is most powerful and beautiful. I love it.
Yeah. Warren Buffett said it takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. And, I think of that anytime I'm tempted to cut corners or do something that could, get me in trouble personally in for my family, my personal life or our business. And so far, my kids still really like me and they're all adults now. They want to be around me. So that's a win.
Excellent, Paul. It's funny, and I'm going to share this with you and my audience as well. I reach out to some of my prior guests, and for you, I've reached out to you a number of times, and you've always been very responsive and helpful. So I truly do appreciate that. Awesome. I also, because I think that you're a wonderful guy, wonderful person, and the way you invest and how you invest is somewhat noble, I'd like to say, and also just commendable. So thank you for doing what you do and providing investors that platform. How can more investors reach you?
One of the ways, again, is on Twitter at Paul Moore, PaulMoore, at Paul Moore Invest. We also have a bunch of free special reports on our website, including one on RV parks, another on self-storage, another on mobile home parks. You can get that at Wellings Capital. That's WELLINGS, wellingscapital.com/resources.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Paul. So I had a blast talking to you today and catching up and learning everything that you're working on and just learning more about your business model, your fund, and everything that's happening in the world today and gathering your insights. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Nico. It's great to be here.
All right. Hey, Small Axe community. I would like to say thank you for listening to another episode of my podcast where we show you how to use your small axe to build a lasting empire. Now, if you liked what you heard, it would mean the world to me if you would subscribe, leave a 5-star rating, and write a review. Also, if you want to get in touch with me, go to my website at smallacecommunities.com. Book a call with me. And until the next episode, keep sharpening those axes.